Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Donald Trump's war in Iran is spiraling out of control in an ever faster spinning vortex of chaos. This week witnessed Saudi Arabia, which had largely stayed out of active combat, joined the United States in bombing a predominantly Shiite militia group that is backed by Iran called the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq. The Saudis have accused the Iraqi Shiite militia of staging attacks on Saudi oil facilities on the 27th of July. Saudi Arabia and the Iran-backed Houthis, who control large parts of Yemen, are at loggerheads again, in many ways rekindling the bruising war that they had fought to a stalemate, with the Houthis now having shut down the Saudi oil shipping in the Red Sea corridor. Even Egypt has suffered its first attack in this war, with an unidentified drone striking an American-owned gas storage tanker called the Energos Winter that was at the Damietta port very close to the Suez Canal. The American oil tanker immediately erupted in flames, which then spread to another oil tanker that was near it. And what is more, Iran appears to have subtly changed its war strategy this week. Instead of resorting to counter strikes for a strike tactic, Tehran now appears to want to seize the initiative and has carried out attacks on American military bases in Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan. So what options are now open for Donald Trump? Our next report tells you more. The American pressure on Iran is relentless. In wave after wave, the United States has bombed Iran, targeting both Iran's military and its critical infrastructure. This video released by the American Central Command will give you a glimpse of the scale of bombardment the United States is carrying out on Iran. To starve the Iranians of their resources, the Americans have also targeted oil tankers that dare to break through the American blockade in the Persian Gulf. In this footage, the American forces are seen rappelling down their helicopters for verifying the Comoros-flagged tanker Charminar, while another Mozambique-flagged oil tanker was reportedly disabled with the use of explosives for attempting to break through the American blockade in the Gulf of Oman. This eyewitness video shows the moment when the Americans again this week attacked Iran's Qeshm Island, bombing Tehran's oil exporting infrastructure, while this video is from the southwestern Iranian city of Ahvaz, in which the Iranians claim 2 student dormitories were targeted.
What is the status of talks? Who from the administration
Well,
is
they always
talking
want to
to
talk,
Iran?
but they break their word so often. Steve is talking, Jared, we have very good people. JD's involved, very strongly involved. We have great people talking. Marco's involved. They're all
They say
involved.
talks aren't happening.
Very good people. We have the best people. But they'll make a deal. As an example, we'll talk about nuclear. And we'll be in there talking about nuclear for 7 hours. I say, why do you need 7? You can take 10 minutes. You have 5 minutes. You should solve it. But 7 hours. And then they'll go out and I'll say, they discuss nuclear. And they'll go out and they'll say, we never discussed nuclear. And I say, why do they say that? All they do is make me angry. You know, you just make me angry. Any other questions?
Do you believe that you can reach a deal with Iran, given that you talked about how disloyal they are?
I'm losing faith in them because they do lie and they do misrepresent. We'll be hitting them. We'll be hitting them very hard. And at some point they're going to say, we just can't take it anymore.
But the war is no longer limited to just Iran. Saudi Arabia and Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen have traded fire. This satellite image shows the massive trail of smoke over the Saudi skies when one of Riyadh's key oil facilities in Jizan was bombed by the Houthis. While this image is of the Abqaiq oil facility in eastern Saudi Arabia, again struck by the Houthis, who've imposed a blockade on the flow of Saudi oil in the Red Sea corridor. In Iraq, the United States and Saudi Arabia carried out some devastating strikes on the Iran-aligned Shiite militia group, the Popular Mobilization Forces, who interestingly since 2016 have been integrated into the Iraqi armed forces, resulting in the deaths of at least about 20 PMF fighters with serious injuries to at least 32 others.
We were shocked at dawn today by the martyrdom of a group of our sacred Popular Mobilization Forces members at the hands of the Zionist American forces and, unfortunately, with the participation of the Saudi forces, whom we believe to be our neighbors. This cowardly and heinous act targeting the Popular Mobilization Forces requires the government to take the necessary measures against these violations of Iraq's sovereignty. The Popular Mobilization Forces is a legal and defensive institution that is no less important than any other state institution. Just as it has played an effective role in maintaining Iraq's security and stability, the government must take the necessary measures as quickly as possible.
On the 29th of July, Egypt's Mediterranean port of Damietta witnessed an American ship at the port erupt in flames. It is unclear as to who's responsible for the attack, but the drone attack happened shortly after the Iranian missile strike on the American forces in Jordan and Washington and Riyadh's attacks on Iraq. But one thing is clear, there is no easy exit for Donald Trump from this war, where even the American paper of record, the New York Times, now appears to be of the opinion that the United States is headed for a strategic defeat in this war. Iran has maintained a vice-like blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, targeting any ship that does not comply with its dictates for a safe passage. On the 31st of July, 2 oil tankers came under attack from Iran, reportedly for trying to break through the Iranian blockade, while 4 other tankers were forced to turn back. The American base at Kuwait's Ahmed Al Jaber Air Base was again bombed in retaliation for the American attack on the Kashmir island.
We have never allowed, and we will never allow the United States to determine when there is war or peace. We will defend ourselves whenever our interests require it, whenever our circumstances require it, whenever we believe we can use diplomacy as a tool to safeguard our national interests. We will certainly use it as such.
Iran is now dictating the tempo of this war. It has restarted fighting even when the Americans had stopped firing. Trump has vowed to intensify his attacks even as the Pentagon is now scrambling to find new targets. As other actors like Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Iraq and Egypt get sucked into this war, Trump is learning an old lesson in warfare. It is easy to start wars, but it is very hard to end them on one's terms. On the 30th of July, Moscow said that its armed forces launched large-scale overnight strikes on Ukrainian targets. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the overnight strikes, launched from land, sea and air with high-precision long-range weapons and attack drones, hit Ukrainian military airfields and defense industrial sites. Ukrainian army, on the other hand, claimed on the same day that it had managed to repel the Russian attacks in multiple directions in the last 24 hours. It has to be noted that both Moscow and Kiev have escalated attacks on each other in recent weeks, as the US-led talks on bringing an end to the Russia-Ukraine war remain effectively frozen. Our next report tells you more.
The Russia-Ukraine war, which is Europe's biggest conflict since World War II and is well into its 5th year, isn't exhibiting any signs of coming to an end anytime soon. Moscow and Kiev continue to trade attacks despite calls for restraint and resolution of the conflict. On the 28th of July, when Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in the United States, anti-ballistic defense and strategic cooperation with the United States were the #1 priority for his meetings with Donald Trump. Ukraine has emphasized time and again that it needs additional Patriot missile interceptors to help defend against Russian attacks. Moscow has not missed any opportunity to exploit Kyiv's critical shortage of Western-supplied anti-ballistic missile defenses. On Thursday, the Ukrainian officials said that Russia attacked at least 10 Ukrainian regions, with dozens of homes, businesses, and infrastructure facilities destroyed or damaged. According to Ukrainian officials, Russia launched more than 70 missiles, a significant number of them ballistic missiles, and over 280 attack drones, of which more than 260 were intercepted. A family of 10, which included a couple, their 7 children, and a grandchild, were killed when a Russian ballistic missile struck their home on the outskirts of Kryvyi Rih. The strike reduced the Voronovs' family home to rubble, leaving a large crater where the family's yard once was.
We have 10 confirmed fatalities. They are the Voronov family, a large family consisting of the father Artem, the mother Olena, their 7 children, and their grandson, who was with them at the time.
The missile destroyed the neighboring home of Serhiy Zhukov, whose son was pulled out from the rubble with the help of residents. A grateful Zhukov, who had built the house with his own hands, was relieved to find his children alive and well.
I have built this house from scratch 15 years ago. I bought it. Everything that's been done here, I've done with my own hands. That's it. I do not have anything else. Thank God, my children were rescued. They were pulled out from rubble. They're alive and well. That's the most important.
The blitz expanded Russia's almost daily bombardment of Ukrainian cities, including the capital of Kyiv, where tens of thousands spent the night sheltering in subway stations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky alleged that a missile that killed 10 members of the same family in the latest Russian strikes may have been supplied by Pyongyang.
According to preliminary reports, the Russians used a North Korean missile in Radushny for the first time in a long time. Of course, there will be further analyses and everything will be verified, but as of now, this is a North Korean ballistic. It's an alliance between Moscow's scum and the insane regime in North Korea, all for the sake of missiles, for the sake of the North Korean contingent here in Europe, on our borders, and for the sake of killing our Ukrainian children.
Ukraine too kept up its assault on the warehouses of Wildberries, Russia's biggest online retailer. 2 warehouses were targeted overnight by new Ukrainian drone attacks. 1 person was injured and more than 200 employees were evacuated after a drone attack sparked a fire in a Wildberries warehouse in the western Penza region. Another Wildberries warehouse was hit by a Ukrainian drone in Sarapur, about 1,100 kilometers east of Moscow. It is to be noted that following months of drone attacks on oil depots and refineries, Kyiv is now trained its sites on logistics hubs used by Russians to buy military equipment and disrupting supplies to the Russian army. But with Trump remaining non-committal on the issue of anti-ballistic systems and anti-ballistic missiles, Ukraine will find it tough to withstand the daily Russian onslaught.
Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is at a critical juncture in its turbulent history. For close to 2 months, thousands of anti-Pakistan government protesters demanding economic and governance reforms have taken to the streets and have stood defiant against the brutal crackdown perpetrated by Islamabad at the behest of the Pakistani Army Chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir. On Monday, more than a dozen people were killed and several others were wounded in the brutal crackdown on residents who had dared to boycott the legislative elections. According to the Joint Awami Action Committee, at least 67 people were killed between the 5th of June and the 28th of July. Our next report tells you more.
Pakistan-occupied Kashmir has been rocked by 8 weeks of anti-government protests. with no end in sight. Tensions are running high on the streets with heavy police presence, but the protesters are in no mood to relent. The principal actor behind these protests is the Joint Awami Action Committee, or JAAC, led by activist Shaukat Nawaz Mir. A grassroots umbrella organization which represents traders and civil society group, the JAAC emerged in 2023 as the leader of an anti-government protest movement across Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. In the run-up to the elections for 45 seats to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir's Legislative Assembly, the JAAC had called for a region-wide strike to protest the reservation of 12 seats for refugees. It is to be noted that these seats are contested by candidates who do not live in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir but elsewhere in Pakistan. According to the organization, the 12 contentious seats are manipulated by Pakistan's establishment to ensure the appointment of a prime minister of its choosing. The regional government retaliated by banning the activist group on the 5th of June under anti-terrorism laws. Since then, the troubled region has been roiled by JAAC-led protests demanding greater autonomy. Pitched battles have been fought between supporters of the outlawed JAAC and the Pakistani security forces, in which, according to the JAAC, at least 67 people have been killed and dozens others have been wounded. In a bid to rein in the rapidly escalating situation, the regional authorities suspended internet and mobile network services, but to no avail. Going from strength to strength, the protests have evolved into a broader rebellion against Pakistani rule. In such a hostile environment, the conduct of a free and fair elections is essentially impossible. But Islamabad, ignoring the writing on the wall, went ahead with local legislative elections boycotted by scores of residents. On the 27th of July, 13 constituencies of Mirpur division in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir went to polls, which were marked by brutal crackdown on residents boycotting the elections. Since Monday, clashes between security personnel and demonstrators have intensified, particularly in Rawalkot and Mirpur, where the highest number of casualties have been reported. The violence erupted during a long march organized by the JAAC from Rawalkot to Muzaffarabad. According to the JAAC, at least 40 activists have been killed and dozens injured in clashes with law enforcement personnel in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir since the first phase of elections on Monday. It is to be noted that the polls were conducted amid a communications blackout, political unrest, an armed crackdown, and allegations of widespread rigging. The issue of the brutal crackdown by the Pakistan military resonated with protesters in the United Kingdom as well. On the 28th of July, the JAAC supporters held a demonstration outside the Pakistani consulate in Bradford against what they labelled as atrocities committed by Pakistan. Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif, however, doubled down on the protesters, labelled them as enemies like India and ruled out any dialogue with them. Rejecting reports of civilian casualties, the Pakistan government instead pointed the finger of blame towards the banned Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP. As the brutal crackdown continues, the women have not been spared either. In Kotli, women protesters ran desperately to save their lives as local police unleashed terror and opened fire on a peaceful protest. But the protesters, despite severe restrictions and brutal crackdown, have continued their fight, giving rise to serious questions about the future political trajectory of the region.
At least 30 people were killed and several others were wounded when armed men attacked a village in northwestern Nigeria early on the 27th of July. Reportedly, the gunmen stormed the community, shooting randomly and set homes on fire before fleeing. In northwestern and central Nigeria, violence by armed gangs and other criminal groups has become a major security challenge. with communities frequently being targeted in these deadly raids. Our next report tells you more.
The Federal Republic of Nigeria is plagued with insecurity on multiple fronts, including a 17-year-long Islamist insurgency in its northeast, separatist violence in the southeast, and frequent deadly clashes between farmers and herders in the central region. In northwest and central Nigeria, armed gangs, locally infamous as bandits, have for years preyed on rural communities. Raiding villages and kidnapping residents for ransom and burning homes after looting them is their modus operandi. Early on Monday, the Naridan village in northwestern Kaduna State's Kaura Council was attacked by armed men. The assailants killed at least 30 people, including several children, and proceeded to set houses on fire before fleeing.
We were just sitting with family members when all of a sudden we heard the attackers hitting our door. That was when we realized that they have come again to attack us, and we started hearing gunshots everywhere.
No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attack. Our correspondent Louisa Olani sent us this ground report in the aftermath of the barbaric act.
Amnesty International has condemned the overnight attack by gunmen in Naridan village, Karu local government area of Kaduna State, that killed over 30 people, including women and children. The assault, which happened Sunday night, had houses set ablaze as residents slept. Community sources confirmed dozens of bodies recovered so far. This latest massacre highlights Nigeria's ongoing struggle against terrorism and banditry. Despite repeated military operations, vulnerable communities in the north continue to pay the heaviest price. As families mourn, many ask, when will this cycle of violence ever end?
It is to be noted that the same community was attacked last year around the same time, but the government seems to have learned no lessons from the past. Some residents complained that security personnel arrived at the village only in the morning hours after the attack. One of the victims, Comfort Monday, who was shot at multiple times during the attack and continues to fight for her life, blamed the attack on Fulani herders.
It is the Fulani people that came to our village and killed our people. They killed 30 people. Also 5 of us were hospitalized, as you can see.
Even though millions of Nigerians of different backgrounds live side by side, intercommunal violence often flares up due to land disputes between Muslim Fulani herders and mostly Christian farmers. In a bid to choke off arms fueling banditry, kidnapping and violent crime, the Nigerian government set ablaze weapons such as rifles, pistols and locally fabricated guns, including mortar tubes, in Abuja on the 30th of July. The weapons had been recovered through security operations and amnesty surrenders. For Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, who is seeking re-election in January, the challenge of a multiple-front war is proving rather daunting despite the sporadic successes. And the recent violent episodes have only underlined the massive task in front of him.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.